We continue our in-depth coverage of the stalemate in the Texas legislature over a voting bill House Democrats say is too restrictive. Now here's a rundown of how things have unfolded so far. On Monday, over 50 state House Democrats flew to Washington, D.C. The move was meant to prevent the House from forming a quorum on the voting bill. Under our state's constitution, the legislature must have a quorum to discuss and vote on bills. On Tuesday, House Republicans voted to have DPS issue arrest warrants for the absent Democrats. The call for arrest merely means that Democrats would be forced upon their arrival to Texas to return to the state capitol for business. Lawmakers would not go to jail. And during our 5 p.m. newscast this evening, our Seth Kovar interviewed Governor Greg Abbott about the upheaval there at the state capitol. And Seth joins us tonight with the governor's response. And Seth, I understand that you have comment also from a longtime member of the state Senate about the situation as well.
Yeah, that's right, Katya. But keep in mind that it's the state House members who walked out. You'll hear from that local state senator in just a moment. We're also about to hear from Governor Abbott, who had some strong words right here on these airwaves.
Have to step up and do their constitutional duty.
But if you ask them, they're protecting the constitutional right to vote for lots of Texans. Still, without a quorum in the House, lawmakers can't act on any special session issue, and Governor Abbott says there's already been deadly consequences.
There have been 5 murders take place by people who were out on bail who should have been behind bars. This bail reform needs to be fixed quickly.
Funding border security is another agenda item that's in limbo right now, but it's the voting bill that's keeping the Democrats away. Back in Austin, local state senator, Democrat Juan Chuy-Hinojosa, is negotiating with Republicans in hopes of finding middle ground.
We are making some progress in trying to eliminate some of the more offensive parts of the bill. So we're working here on the Senate side to try to come up with a piece of legislation that is acceptable.
But Governor Abbott says the voting bill is already a done deal in that chamber, and eventually, he says, it will become law.
It's already passed out of the Texas Senate, and it will pass out of the Texas House as soon as the Democrats who've taken this taxpayer-paid junket to Washington, D.C. get back to work and do the job they were elected to do.
Earlier this week, the Democrats who are actually in Washington say they're using money from fundraisers to pay for the trip. You can see my full interview with Governor Abbott on our website. That's christv.com. Katya?
Will do. All right. Thank you for that, Seth. And over at the state capitol this afternoon, the Texas NAACP and members of the black clergy held a prayer and justice march for voting rights. Jeremy Coleman, who is the president of the NAACP Corpus Christi, says that if changes cannot be made to the Texas bill, then help needs to come from the federal level.
Language that's in there, it doesn't necessarily suppress voters overall in general, but we're talking about individuals specifically that affect minorities and also your low-income individuals, or maybe even voters for the first time who are getting out there.
And Coleman says lawmakers have a job to do, and if that requires breaking quorum to send a message, then they're doing their job. And as Seth mentioned just a few minutes ago, those absent House Democrats say fundraising is what's paying for their trip to Washington. But another question came up. Are they still being paid their per diem stipend? State legislators currently receive $600 per month for holding their positions. And then on top of that, they get a per diem, which is an extra $221 for each day of any regular or special legislative session when that is held. Well, Texas House Speaker Republican Dade Phelan is demanding that Democrats return those per diem payments. Chair of the House Democratic Caucus, Representative Chris Turner, says he expects that his colleagues will decline those payments at the end of the month when they are handed out. And speaking of those Democrats, about a dozen of them met with Senate Democrat Joe Manchin, at the U.S. Capitol today. Manchin is one of the key votes to get a national voting rights bill passed. The state Democrats calling the meeting productive. They also said that they have no plans to return to Texas before the end of the 30-day special session.
We're going to have a meeting and huddle up and start talking about the results of this meeting and we continue to plan strategic discussions with people in this building. We've scratched the surface here. We want to continue to make sure that the voting rights of Texans and all people across the country are protected. And that's what we're here to do. We committed to doing it, and no one's lost that commitment.
And that right there is El Paso Democrat Joe Moody. He learned earlier today that he has been stripped of his position as Speaker pro temp of the Texas House for leaving the state.